Fourth, I would really like to see a Spider-Man movie without Mary Jane. I mean, it isn't that I hate Mary Jane, but I don't like this version of her. After years of wondering what she might be like on the big screen, this just isn't quite what I expected. I've heard a lot of people already say they'd like to see Gwen Stacy done right and be Peter's first girlfriend like she was in the early comics, and I think maybe I'd like that too. To be sure, Mary Jane is more interesting than Gwen in the comics. But doing Gwen gives you a chance to see just how cool Mary Jane is in contrast, at least when she's the confident Spitfire as opposed to the pathetic, awkward girl who never quite got past a high school view of the world. To be fair, she's closer to the comic book version in this movie than she is in the sequels, and it seems like that's the direction she was going in the first couple of scenes, up until we see that she's in an abusive home life. Now, that abusive home life thing could have worked if she remained confident, always brushed it off, and refused to let it affect her attitude, but of course she doesn't do that. This just isn't the Mary Jane who would say, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." Also, I get that Peter Parker is socially awkward, but why can't he be that way in a charming way? Every time he says something to Mary Jane, I get embarrassed for him. Really, like I start writing down better lines, the kind that don't sound like he memorized them from a Harlequin romance novel, and then I try to feed them through the TV screen so that maybe just this one time he won't come off as pathetic. I get that the dialogue is supposed to be realistic. These are maybe the kind of things that guys in high school or just out of high school would say, but I don't know, somehow I don't care. Fifth, the villain. Now, I don't think they should do Goblin again in the next movie because that's one of the things that was actually done pretty well here, and it's too soon. I'd say put Harry and Norman Osborn in the film and leave the opening for Norman to become the Goblin later. Willem Dafoe is by far the best casting choice in the movie to me. He plays multiple personalities well, and I love how many emotions he can play in a single scene. Doc Ock is always talked about as being a really sympathetic supervillain, and he is, but I mean, Norman is pretty sympathetic too. He tests the serum on himself because he's desperate for his glider project to go forward. This isn't necessarily a smart move, but I like that he uses himself as the human test, not because he's crazy, I mean, at least not yet, but because he really believes it'll work. This not only gives him increased strength, but it creates the Goblin personality. Norman doesn't know he's killing people at first, and when he does, he's mortified. He tries to control the Goblin, but the Goblin ends up controlling him almost completely. I like how sometimes Norman is in control and sometimes the Goblin is, like at Peter's apartment for Thanksgiving. This is a really tense, nuanced scene, and you wonder just what the psychotic Norman might do. Norman resists the Goblin for a while, but he finally just gives in, exactly as it happened in the comics. But once again, whatever villain the reboot uses needs to have clear goals that don't all involve killing the superhero. As Browncoat Eric likes to bring up, all the Goblin really wants at first is to kill Norman's board of directors for turning on him. Spider-Man actually fails to stop him from doing that. So why is the Goblin so obsessed with getting Spider-Man out of his way after this? I mean, he should think Spider-Man is incompetent. He managed to do the only clear goal he ever had. After all, after this, all he does is try to hurt and later kill Spider-Man. He offers him the chance to join him, but judging by the pumpkin bomb he's holding behind his back when he makes this offer the second time, it's hard to tell how sincere he is. And besides, join him in doing what exactly? What does he want after the board is gone? Now let's see, we have two guys who both have super strength, both have the ability to move through the air in various ways. One has spider sense, and they both seem pretty acrobatic. I guess they could join forces and become gold medalists in like every Olympic sport there is. Or stand on train tracks waiting for trains to show up and then jump out of the way at the last second over and over again. I don't know, that's all I've got. Does he want to rule New York? The world? The issue is the guy's already rich and probably still will be after he's fired. He has zero motivation. Sixth, this film has good grasp of what Peter's values are supposed to be, and that's something the next movie should definitely hold on to. Peter is too whiny in a few places, but he tries to do the right thing, except for that one place where I think he looks like a murderer. You can tell he's been brought up by an older conservative couple in the sometimes old-fashioned way he talks and how he's super polite all the time. He's made very real when dealing with his new abilities and in trying to juggle so much at once. He feels guilty when he swings around New York all afternoon and then comes home and remembers he was supposed to help his uncle paint the kitchen. He won't accept a job from Norman Osborn because he wants to earn things on his own. He refuses to make a move with Mary Jane because his friend Harry is dating her. He always tried to build Mary Jane up when things aren't going so well. And he is a brainy nerd, but that isn't played up nearly enough. I do want to see him doing more science in the reboot. I think going with traditional web shooters rather than organic webbing would be a good step in that direction. After all, what's the point of Spider-Man knowing science if he never uses it in his superheroic endeavors? Oh, and I also want a realistic reason for that costume this time. He makes this makeshift costume to wrestle in, but all of a sudden he has the means to make this amazing suit. I guess it only cost $100 since we know that's about how much money he's got at this point. 7. Now that I've ripped this movie to pieces, here's what I think really works in it. Harry and Peter's relationship is genuine, and I want something like that in the reboot. I like the dichotomy between them. Peter was raised with wholesome family values, and Harry's father was never around for him. Harry looks up to and respects Peter because he wishes he had a life closer to his, where family feels more like family and there are answers to problems besides throwing money at them. This reminds me of something. In the comics, sometimes being Spider-Man made things worse rather than better, and Peter had to struggle between doing what was right and doing what was good for him. If a supervillain was hurting someone, he had the ability to stop it, so he felt like he had to. But there was always a risk that the villain might find out who he is and would put his friends and family in danger. This movie uses that idea with the Green Goblin, who wants Spider-Man, for some reason, and finds out he's Peter because Peter was careless, and that makes him vulnerable. I like this idea to go farther in a reboot and once again have Spider-Man be more proactive. Some people like Spider-Man and some people hate him. This was always a big idea in the comics. Jameson isn't the only person who thinks Spider-Man is a menace, and he has to struggle with the fact that even the good he does sometimes is misconstrued as bad, or he'll make a mistake that questions whether he should even be on the job. This is handled a lot better than in the sequels. In 2, everyone hates him at the beginning, and in 3, everyone loves him at the beginning. This movie is more realistic in that respect. Despite its problems, this movie is a lot of fun. We feel the thrill Peter feels of web swinging. Spider-Man is acrobatic, and it's fun to watch him jump around, saving people and beating up thugs. I'm going to give Spider-Man a 3 out of 4, which might sound high after all the problems I've described. Like X-Men, though, it's a setup movie. There aren't a lot of plot holes so much as there just isn't enough plot. The thing is, I really did find myself invested in a lot of the characters in this film. I just wanted them to be smarter about how they handled things. It's okay for Peter to be emotionally affected by stuff, but the few places where he's just sitting there feeling sorry for himself are enough to make me like him less. The reboot needs to take Peter's values in this film, his need for adventure, and his thirst for knowledge, and then give him more of a spine. Thanks for watching, and next time I'll do Batman Forever.